Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining myself and Ed today. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to let everybody kind of funnel in here real quick, and then we will get started. Just as some housekeeping items, my name is Eric. I will introduce myself again. This is Compliance Without the Chaos. The title speaks for itself. Ed and I are going to dive extremely deep into this crazy compliance topic and try to make it a little less crazy and help you navigate this world of compliance. This should be about 60 minutes worth of a webinar. We'll make sure we'll have some Q&A. Please ask them during the discussion. We do have a chat feature available. Ed and I will answer them in real time. Before we get started, again, any audio or visual issues, please type them into the chat as well. We've got an awesome support system from my end, Amy, who will help you. And if we do not get to all the questions, please put them in the chat. Ed and I will follow up with you after the session today. All of this is being recorded. We're going to go ahead and send this out post-call. And let's go ahead and get started. I very much appreciate everybody for being here. Again, my name is Eric Levitas. I am the VP of Business Development here at ControlCase. We audit and certify against all these crazy standards. We are the big bad boss at the end of the rainbow. And I am here with a friend and a colleague, Ed. Ed, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. The big bad boss. How do I cope with that? I'm Ed Correa. I'm president of Sagacent Technologies. Sagacent is a recognized global leader in IT management, cybersecurity, and compliance. In fact, we're rated 43 in the world right now. We specialize in helping organizations just like yours in highly regulated industries reduce the risk and simplify compliance, saving you time, money, and stress.
So what are we going to talk about today, Rick? So we've got a lot to go through. And the idea of this discussion, again, is there's all these different sides of compliance. There's the regulated side. There's the less regulated side. Who, what, when, where, and why. We're going to talk through these frameworks, what's required. We're going to kind of go over a few of them. Please, if you have specific questions as it relates to the frameworks, you've got the two correct people to help answer them. And then this idea of like why MSP plus auditor relationship and why as the end client should you guys be partnering with all the parties around you that need to take you to the finish line rather than piecemealing it. You want to control the conversation as it relates to your whole ecosystem from the beginning to the middle to the end and all the follow-up work that comes after these assessments. And then ultimately we're going to talk about risks, right? So again, lots to discuss. I am going to pass it off to Ed of the why, and then we are going to dive in from there. Ed, please.
Sure. So why are we here? A managed services IT company and a compliance audit company. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. We walk into a bar or something. But we're here to provide you with the answers to your compliance questions. And this will be a decidedly shorter webinar if you don't ask questions. So please put them in the chat. We're here to hopefully rid you of related frustrations around here. We realize that there are a lot of misconceptions around regulations, compliance, what needs to be done, how it is to be done, and by whom. Today's webinar is specifically for IT leaders, IT engineers. We want to remove a ton of the confusion and provide answers and hopefully show you the best practices structure that we use so that you can help yourself, or if you need assistance, we're here to help.
You know, if I could just piggyback on that, right? So one thing I see in industry as boots on the ground is you get asked to do a standard. Maybe it's an RFP you're bidding on. It's an end client, or it's somebody in your supply chain asking you for one of these crazy standards, some sort of acronym soup. How quickly can you get there? Why do you need to get there? Which is the right path for you to take based on the industry or your end client? And then ultimately, who are the folks you need to invest money in accordingly to get you to that finish line? That is, you know, again, Ed and I have been having discussions as a group for a while and working with end clients for a while. And all these words you see on the screen and everything Ed just said really culminates to why do you guys need to make decisions early, working with the right team? And that is the hope after this discussion is that you guys can make really good buying decisions as it relates to these standards and kind of dispel some of the rumors that are out there, because there are a lot of rumors about these standards. Ed, yeah, what are these frameworks? Tell me
Sure.
Can you share?
So I find when I talk to IT leaders and I mention frameworks, I get kind of the deer in the headlight most of the time. A framework in cybersecurity and compliance is a structured set of standards, guidelines, and best practices that organizations use to manage security, protect data, and demonstrate trust. They tell you what needs to be in place, those controls, the policies, the processes. They often don't dictate how you need to do it. They leave that open to interpretation. But some frameworks are voluntary. We'll see that in a moment, and others are mandatory. So, if we want to go to the next slide, I'll start talking about that one right away. So I put this together to make it a little more simplistic. Often when I'm running into companies, there's a big confusion. They will hear about certain standards or compliance standards that are voluntary. You can do it yourselves. Others are a little bit too upset about requiring an objective third-party organization to attest that things are correct. So what I've put together here is you've got column A, the self-attested category of standards. You've got column B, which would require that third-party certified organization like ControlCase to come in and pronounce what you did is actually correct. Then I've got a blue row across the middle that talks about purely voluntary and best practice things, versus the green row indicates those legally mandated standards. But altogether, you end up with kind of a 2x2 matrix, 4 independent areas that need to be called out. I'm going to take a moment and talk about CIS. CIS controls are Sagacent's minimum standard for any client working with us. And that's usually for clients that are not mandated or needing to follow another standard. Conversely, I'm going to go diagonally to the third-party certified and legally mandated, the new CMMC, which is a big deal if you're doing anything for the Department of Defense, and it is expected to expand to a lot more divisions of the government. That one's the big daddy. That one requires that everything be done just so, be provable. There are an initial phase where you can assess things yourself, but it ends up requiring a C3PAO to come in and pronounce that you are compliant. So I hope this chart helps. It's definitely a keeper slide. Eric, what do you think here? What do you want to call out?
I want to spend some time on this slide, right? Because it's very interesting, right? ISO and SOC 2, they are like, why would you get them, right? It's like, who's asking you to get them? Well, what I've seen in industry is somebody like an RFP, like I just mentioned, or a client says, you need to have ISO or SOC, and it's like, well, which one is right for me? And, a lot of times we have discussions with clients, well, where are you doing business, right? Are you international? Are you are you just national, right? And some, ISO is a more globally recognized standard. SOC's a more nationally recognized standard. ISO, and they all have different cycles. They all have different requirements. They all require different things on the front end. Like on SOC 2, there's trust criteria. On ISO, it has an ISMS that allows for nonconformities, but slowly wants you to build out like a compliant program. But it's interesting because like you can't not do that on your own. You have to go to an accredited company, right? So like we're ANAB accredited for ISO. We help write these reports through SOC 2. But it's interesting how you have the self-attested category for HIPAA, and I want to pick on HIPAA a little bit because I'm sure you see it. I can't tell you how many times I run into an organization. They're like, do they handle PII? Yeah, okay, so hold on. They're handling PHI. They're handling health information. Are they HIPAA compliant? No. Are they willing to be HIPAA compliant? No. Okay, well, I guess technically, legally, they need to be HIPAA, but I can't force them to be HIPAA, and only if and when a breach happens. Good luck. And it's kind of like, I look at PCI too, and it's like, people try to push the limits on PCI all day. And yes, you need an approved QSA to do that, which we do. But man, can I tell you how many people have credit card processing systems, or how many people accept credit cards that aren't doing the appropriate measures? God forbid somebody comes and finds you, and then they go all the years back and they start to fine you money. I mean, it puts businesses out of business. And so I wanted to poke on those because, man, it's just, I'm curious what you think on those two in particular.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share a couple of examples. A company that I will not name, 18 locations in the San Francisco Bay Area, medical operation. They got hacked. Suddenly, their ability to operate was in question. If they were not able to produce a HIPAA, validated HIPAA compliance, they were going to get their license ripped. They were going to shut down. So we got involved. We worked with them for some time to gather the required information. And boy, was it a pain, because they were nowhere in hell compliant with HIPAA. They were just not operating that way. In fact, I'll say that I've never walked into a medical operation where we were allowed to audit them and look at the environment that ever was HIPAA compliant without outside assistance. We then turned to ControlCase and said, hey, we need you to validate our findings and issue a HIPAA certificate for them. And they're happily operating now, and their insurers and other entities are fine. Another case in point, we're seeing lots of large corporations that are subject to certain certifications or compliance requirements themselves. They're pushing it down on subcontractors who work for them. One of my favorite ones is a mom and pop machine shop down a few towns below me that was machining parts for Lockheed, for jets. And Lockheed said, hey, we're subject to all these requirements. We're not going to work with any subs that are not compliant. You don't have to get the actual certification, but you need a third party to come in and make sure and attest that you're doing all that. And we came in, and it was a nightmare trying to get them in compliance with that. I had to write letters to Lockheed and explain it, but they were fine in the end, because that small machine shop was now in compliance and could demonstrate that they were not a risk to work with. Right now, we're seeing organizations, if you are subject to one of these requirements, you could lose clients, you could lose contracting relationships, it could cost you money. I don't want people to think it's just about getting a piece of paper. There's real financial costs involved.
Yeah, and again, just looking at your map, right? I tell everybody, CIS or NIST CSF should be a generic baseline that your company follows, whether you have a compliance standard or not, because
yes,
NIST CSF, CIS map to a lot of these standards. They will not map up, just because you're NIST CSF doesn't mean you're compliant with everything, but it is a whole hell of a lot easier to gain compliancy if you're going after ISO or SOC or CMMC, whatever you name it, because I run into companies all the time that are like, I'm good, I don't have any security standards. Great. Everybody's at risk of getting breached. Every minute of the day, you are at risk of getting breached. There's no way to tell somebody, oh, because you are aligned to the standards, you won't get breached. No way. You're mitigating the risk to get breached in the what if factor. And the what if factor reduces significantly when you align to a standard. And then again, I'm just talking about the self-attestation, voluntary best practice world, that it's like, you should be doing this at a minimum. Nobody's going to come and check your work. Nobody's going to come and tell you you can or can't be, but you fill out a security questionnaire. I bet if you're NIST CSF or CIS compliant, those security questionnaires become much easier. I bet if you're engaged with these supply chain folks, like you're mentioning, you're able to then with confidence say, I could work with you. But then you start to, again, I just look at your chart here. CMMC, you're not CMMC compliant at time of award. Guess what? No award for you. FedRAMP, you want to do business with the government and you're a cloud service provider, can't do it. Sorry. Right. Even in the CMMC world, and we'll get into these standards a little bit more in depth. But again, I look at these things like HIPAA, GDPR. It's like FTC safeguard, like that ruling went into effect, middle of last year. It's like, you need to have this. And if you don't, and you've gotten away with it at this point, it's something that you need to take in serious consideration of to either get compliant. And again, that's why Ed and I are here, because it's so interesting of this relationship with the MSP and the audit partner, because in theory, when that big bad auditor comes to that door and says, all right, well, show me evidence, show me who's responsible for this, show me the technical controls that are in place for X, Y, and Z. And again, each of these standards has their own flavor of asking the same question differently. Some are more prescriptive, some are more administrative, some are more technical. But at the end of the day, these standards require a really good technical partner, a really good administrative partner, because when I come to your door, not me, my much smarter assessors, when my assessors come to your door, they're going to expect it to be in a buttoned up book, something easy for them to review. You never want to make the auditor's life harder. And again, we'll talk more about the why we're here, but making sure you take full control of the relationship. Against, doesn't matter what standard you see here, the process remains the same. And again, we'll get into that process, but it's just the level of prescriptiveness changes, not the how and the why.
A key takeaway from this slide is that regardless of the regulatory compliance you need to attain, it's your success or failure is going to be determined by the cybersecurity, well, the framework that is tied to it. So these frameworks are developed independently of those requirements, but the regulation, the compliance standard will defer to a given framework. And for example, CIS version 8, it's now version 8.1, is 153 safeguards. That sounds like a lot. That's very, very little. NIST 800.171 is over 1,000 safeguards. Much harder, much more granular. So it's important to understand that. One of the value of a company like me, when we talk about an MSP plus an auditor, it's not really just any MSP. It has to be an MSP that's very familiar with these frameworks and the compliance standards, and then that company can work closely with a company like ControlCase.
Yeah, the wrong readiness partner, the wrong IT partner, and again, everybody's got their level of expertise, but doing your due diligence to make sure they have the experience to back the work that they're going to put in front of an assessor, because I have to tell you, it's a really tough place for the assessors or even the sales guys in the assessment world to say, hey, look, Mr. or Mrs. Partner, i.e. you, Ed, thank you so much for bringing this client in, but they're not ready at all. We can't even start this assessment. So now that client looks at you to say, what? I thought you were the guys, right? You were the girls to help me do this. So I echo that sentiment, Ed, and I think we can move on, but this is just, sure. I think this is such an important slide. I wanted to spend some time on it. So let's get a little granular here, right? So I'm going to dive into these, and Ed, please provide feedback. We've got 5-ish standards that I wanted to talk through, and we wanted to kind of open up the kimono here, right? We wanted to show you guys, the audience, what the audit entails, the life cycle, the timeline, some of the budget constraints, just to be very transparent. And again, these are big numbers. Everything is scope dependent. So I just want to be very clear there. No matter what framework we're talking about, scope is king. So whether you're on the readiness side working with Ed to align your scope, the first thing he's going to say is, well, we need to lock in your scope. How many locations? How many employees? How many different environments? What are the environments? Are you hybrid? Are you on-prem? What does this to be in scope? What doesn't need to be in scope? Because again, for some of these standards, they are organizational standards. But for some of these frameworks, that you could enclave, you can minimize the scope. And for you as the end client, that makes it less expensive, easier to manage, easier to upkeep. But it's only if and when you can do that, right? So like for SOC 2, right? So SOC 2 is a report that gets written. There's SOC 1, there's SOC 2, there's type 1, there's type 2. In the SOC 2 world, it's in your best interest to figure out how quickly do you need this, right? If somebody's asking you for a SOC 2 report now, you have to go with a type 1. A type 1 is a point in time, whereas a type 2 requires at least 6 or 12 months of operational efficiency to go into doing that audit. So again, when you work with a readiness partner, it should be the first thing you identify. Are you going after a type 1 or type 2, and who's asking for this and how quickly do they need it? From there, they're going to say, what trust criteria is in scope, right? With SOC 2, there's 5 trust criteria: security, availability, confidentiality, process integrity, and privacy. Security is a have to. You can't not choose it, but it's the only one that is a have to, right? So with SOC 2, it is up to you, the end client, and your readiness partner to figure out what type of data you guys, are you processing PHI? Like maybe privacy needs to be in scope. Do you have something that maybe needs process integrity? Is availability a big deal? Like, is your end client looking for how available you are to either respond to something or whatnot, right? So in the SOC 2 world, working with the right partner, building the right documentation, aligning the right technical controls, understanding the timeline, figuring out which type you're going after, understanding the trust criteria. All of that combined will happen under the guidance of somebody like an Ed and implementing those readiness tools and buying those technologies to ultimately come to me. And from that point, I mean, it's a 6-month process to get this audit completed for both the type 1 and type 2, right? That's reviewing everything, validating everything, writing the report, and ultimately issuing the report that you are looking for it to be written and making sure that it's written to our standards. That process takes forever. So again, how quickly you need this and how quickly you're ready is a huge deal. And those engagements could be, it shows 50 to 150K, but again, that SOC 2 audit is totally is totally scope dependent. I mean, you can get down into the 20s or late teens depending on how large or small you are. But for a really good SOC 2 audit and all in budget, and again, this is all in budget, I think we're talking about. You've got my price, you've got implementing tools price, you've got paying an administrative company like Ed to that price, right? All of that combined. I mean, it's a 6-figure type engagement, plus or minus, again, depending on your scope. So before we move to ISO, Ed, do you have any feedback on SOC 2? That is, I hear about SOC every day. So I feel like this discussion is so timely.
No, I think you gave a great introduction to it. The only thing I would kind of laugh a little bit is the project timeline and budget. I've never seen a SOC 2 or SOC 2 type 2 get done at the 6-month period. Generally, getting the proper data, making sure things are configured and that there's proof that it's being done takes time. So yeah, these certifications are not things you want to say, okay, we're going to do it next week. None of them get done in a week or even a month. These are journeys. They are hard.
Yep. I echo that 100%. Yeah. 6 to 9. It's funny you say that because we get that all the time. Somebody's like, how quickly can you do this? I'm like, look, we can start as soon as you're ready. But if you're not ready, the project stalls again. Then even assuming you are ready, it is a multi-month again, 6 to 9 months. It's like the eyes go like this. It's like, what? I need this to respond to an RFP tomorrow. I'm like, we could write you an engagement letter and maybe you could use that as a mechanism, but you will not have a SOC 2 report tomorrow. It just won't exist. But you could show them you're talking to an assessor. Moving on to ISO. So ISO is another one. And we put SOC and ISO on the same page because I feel like in a discussion, it's either SOC or ISO. I feel like every time I talk to somebody, they're trying to make a distinction between the two. In the SOC 2 world, it's definitely more national based. We see a lot of companies like MSPs get it, SaaS providers, cloud companies. Whereas ISO, we're seeing it more of a globally recognized standard. So if you've got business with different companies that you're doing business with in different countries, ISO might be in a more appropriate route. And what's the difference? That there is a huge difference because ISO requires something called an ISMS to begin the audit. It's the first thing I ask. I always ask, how many locations are in scope? How many employees? Do you have a completed ISMS, Information Security Management System, which covers all the policies, all the controls, all the governments? It's like it's a big book that the assessors are going to go through. And when you're going through the audit, in the ISO world, there's like a requirement of how many days we spend with you. It's very interesting, this ISO world. They have a lot of particulars on us as the auditor on what we can, what we can't do. For both of these standards, we can't help you get ready and assess you. Those have to be two different bodies, right? That's why you see two different bodies on this call. Ed will help you ready. We do the audit. You cannot have the same company do both. But with ISO, SOC 2 is an annual, right? So SOC 2, you might go SOC 2 type 1, year 1, SOC 2 type 2, year 2, and then you would upkeep your SOC 2 type 2 every single year. There's an observation period that the assessors would go back and say, okay, are you compliant? And it is an every year thing. ISO, it's an interesting discussion because if it's your first time getting an ISO audit, there's a stage 1 and a stage 2 audit that would happen year 1. And year 1's the big daddy audit. It's the big one that you go in and you've got to, you present your ISMS and you can have non-conformities, right? You can go in and in theory not be fully compliant. And then year 2 is what's called a surveillance audit. So year 2, you're coming in and you are supposed to fix some of those things that were discovered in year 1. Year 3, same idea. It's a surveillance audit. So you are continuously fixing and updating and showing progression as it relates to ISO. Well, now we're talking about Year 4, so year 1, year 2, year 3, it's big audit, surveillance audit, surveillance audit. Now we're back to the big audit, and then the cycle continues. So in the ISO world, I guess it's triannual, but it's an annual engagement with that big audit every 3 years with intermediate surveillance audits. And then you have internal audits that you're required to do. So again, same idea. It is a multi-month experience. It is not inexpensive. We see budgets for the assessment part and the readiness part and the IT part. But I just want to be very clear. It's like, it's yes, Ed and I can help you make a decision on SOC 2 or ISO, but it is very dependent on who is asking for it and why and when. That would dictate ISO or SOC 2. Ed, what thoughts do you have?
Well, just a couple. Typically, ISO 27001 we see in conjunction with manufacturing often. However, because this is a journey and it takes a lot of time, I do want to give a little happy note here that very often the people that are asking you to get this done for them to prove that you are not a security risk will be overjoyed just that you're starting the journey. You create a formal statement, you send them the letter. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to attain ISO 27001 compliance, and here's where we expect to get it done. Most organizations that will be twisting your arm saying, we want you to attain this, we will give you some slack. They're going, okay, you've got a plan. Get to work, start updating us on what's going on. So again, especially in the manufacturing world, letting the people who are asking you to attain this know that you are serious, you are embarking on this is your plan, and you're going to give them regular updates, they will take a chill pill and go away for as long as you hit those deadlines.
Yeah, no, I see it too. I see SOC 2, like a lot of companies use it commercially to support like their supply chain. But for ISO, it's a point system in the government, right? If you're a government contractor, do you need ISO? Maybe not. But will ISO make you differentiate you from your peers and give you more points to bid on that specific contract? Sure. If you're using it in that light, ISO apps, we're just talking about 27,001, but there's 42,001 for AI, 9,001 more of a organizational structure. You've got 27,701, 27,702. I mean, there's ISO for days, right? Just like there's SOC 1, SOC 2. SOC 1's more financial controls, right? So just being able to have the discussion with the right people to help guide you into the right direction before you invest all this time and money. I think that's what we're trying to get across today, is like, make sure these conversations are happening quickly with the right due diligence in mind. So,
and a final comment. Don't think that just because your company has not been subject to these in the past, that it will stay that way. We've seen a couple good-sized manufacturers here in the San Francisco Bay Area that they were seeking outside investment, and those investors would not give them the money they wanted until they had attained certification. They didn't want to invest in new risks. So keep that in mind. I think the days are rapidly coming to a draw where larger organizations are not going to have something that proves you're not a security risk, that your operations are above board, you're following best practices.
Just to move on, and again, we're handpicking a handful of these frameworks. Again, there's God knows how many frameworks out there that are required based on where you do business, how you do business. But I think CMMC is a big one to note. For us at ControlCase, we're one of the CCPAs. I mean, think about it, right? There's like 80 of us, and only a piece of the 80 are actually doing the assessments. And then you've got, MSPs and readiness partners and RPOs. And there's only a handful of them that actually do good work and are trustworthy. And, think about, we just talked about SOC 2 and ISO. When you go through those audits, you don't have to be perfect. They can write, in the SOC 2 report, you can write, they don't really have this. It's dependent on if you want it to be written in a report, but the report can include gaps. An ISO audit can include nonconformities. CMMC, 100% or nothing, right? So like in the CMMC model, if you're a defense industrial based client, it will be spreading to the rest of the government. If you are, if you're doing business with the Department of Defense at any capacity, if you handle a contract, you at a minimum, there's 3 levels of CMMC. you will need level 1, which is a self-assessment. In my opinion, self-assessments, you should avoid at all costs. I think you should outsource your self-assessment at all costs. Go find a partner like Ed or partner like us and make sure it's validated by a third party, because False Claims Act is a real thing. And we don't know who in industry is trying to call other companies out for not doing their due diligence. But in my opinion, CMMC and FedRAMP are probably two of the strictest frameworks that have come out in a very long time that are scaring the hell out of people, because it is there's a lot at risk if you don't do this right? So CMMC 3 levels. Level 1 is self-assessment. Level 2, if you handle CUI, and you will know if you handle CUI, it needs to be marked appropriately. You need a level 2 assessment done by a third party. So again, we talked about that chart a few slides ago. You want an assessment, you got to come through us. You want to get ready, you should be engaging the right partners. You should be having, if you need an outsourced MSP, you should make sure that the MSP is, like, working on their due diligence and their readiness, like somebody like Ed, who has their documentation together. Because when they come to our door, and whoever's, again, scope dictates everything. We're going to look at how many external service providers do you have? Your MSPs and your cloud service providers are in that scope. How many locations do you have? Are you on-prem? Are you hybrid? All of those things matter. And then, we're booking way out in advance. We are so crazily booked because people are actually taking this seriously. As of, what's today, the 30th of September, November 10th, CMMC 48 CFR goes into effect. It's fully enforceable, right? So we don't know how contractors are going to take that. They have every right to say, if you're dealing with this type of stuff, it's in your contract, you better have this. We've given you years to have this. Good luck. And you handle CUI, you need to go get assessed. And then you come and find me, and I go, well, you're not even ready. You need to go back to Ed. And Ed and you go on this 6 to 12 month journey, and then you have to get into my queue, which could be 4 to 6 months out. Now we're a year behind. You've missed that contract, right? So it's just really important. CMMC, we can have a whole discussion on CMMC. And it's wild. But again,
we may want to make a webinar just on that.
Oh yeah. What thoughts do you have on CMMC in particular? Because it's much different than PCI and HIPAA. I want to focus on that for a second.
If there's any standard on this list that is the most overhyped and misunderstood, it's CMMC. This is a major journey. It takes a long time. And one of the bigger problems is there are very, very few certified C3PAOs out there to give you that final assessment. These guys are getting booked up now. And if you're wanting to get this done quickly, forget it, because they're going to be, we'll get back to you, in 2026, 2027. And unfortunately, the information about this has been out for a while. We just had the final announcement, but a lot of organizations really kept saying, we'll deal with it when it's finalized, rather than getting going and starting getting the expertise. Now's the time to pick your partners so that you can move forward on this.
Yeah. And again, just in the vein of what we've been talking about, could be multi-months, if not a year, to get ready. With CMMC, you're required to have a system security plan. Required. You can't get started, right? You need to have a completed system security plan. You need to have your system operational. And when you get assessed, at the end of the assessment, there are three ways you pass. You pass, you get 100%. You fail, or you conditionally pass. And conditional passing is not something you should be yearning for, but ideally, if you get an 88 out of 110 and you only fail the allowable poems, which there's only a handful of them that are there's 1.3 point and 5 point items that all add up to 110. If you fail just a handful of 1 point items that are allowable, you have 180 days to remediate. But again, you go back into our queue and you have to show us that you're 100%. So at the end of the day, if you want a certification, 100% completion rate, A+. Can't have a 99%, need to have a 100%. CMMC is that serious. And again, it's a lot of money. Just the assessment itself could be 50+ grand. And then you've got to pay the IT provider. You've got to pay your administrative partner. SSP should be hundreds of pages, ideally, right? It's a lot of work that goes into explaining why you are safeguarding government information, specifically CU. So again, we should have a discussion on that as a whole. I feel very passionate about CMMC, and that's why ControlCase hired me. But CMMC, I feel like this should be stamped on my forehead, how much I talk about it. Any final thoughts, Ed, before we jump to PCI and HIPAA?
Just that I'm looking at the chat and I'm not seeing any questions, folks. This is your opportunity as we're going along to ask us questions. But Eric, please continue with PCI DSS.
Yeah, so I'll just finish with PCI and HIPAA, right? So again, PCI requires a QSA to come in. So you are required to have a certified body come in and self-assess and assess you. Now, remember with PCI, it's all based on, it's all scope, right? Scope, I feel like a broken record here. PCI requires, what level are you? What letter, are you, how many transactions are you transacting a year? What type of platform? Are you e-commerce only? Do you have a handheld? Or you guys have a stationary, right? All of that matters because it dictates what level of PCI you need, what level of, do you need it? What type of QSA do you need? What type of, do you just need an SAQ? Again, all these crazy acronyms all mean, have you identified scope appropriately to become PCI compliant? Is your issuing bank raining down on you saying you need to have this? Or are you being told by somebody in your supply chain, you better be PCI compliant? Again, with that comes appropriate scanning, appropriate documentation, appropriate technology in place so that when you get assessed by a QSA, they can show that you are in fact meeting these various controls that each of these levels, and again, there's SAQA, B, C, D, right? And as you find your way on the hierarchy of PCI, doing it appropriately and making sure that you get that report at the end of it is what you're going to show to your end client to say, hey, I'm doing this. I'm doing whatever I'm supposed to do to be compliant. I didn't mention it before. CMMC is every 3 years. PCI is, every year, right? We're right back to this annual attestation. You need to go through a PCI assessment every year to show that you are upkeeping your security as it relates to your card information. Same idea with HIPAA, right? And we talked about it before. HIPAA is so hard because technically you don't need, there's no like, we're a QSA, we're a C3PAO, we're a 3PAO, we're ANAB accredited, all these things that are technically anybody can run your HIPAA security risk assessment, but making sure you're doing it with the right partner and making sure you're keeping up with it annually, in my opinion, and making sure you have the right policy development and training, because again, HIPAA and PCI are one of those things where if they catch you, they're just going to go back and fine you all the years that you're not compliant, and it just puts businesses out of business. But it's the toughest one, in my opinion, to get somebody to make a decision, because most folks handle PHM. Most folks also probably process credit cards, but it's doing your due diligence with the right partners to say, am I in scope? Does this affect me? And what steps do I need to take to at least get to a compliant status? And then from there, making a decision on, do I need to go to a third party or not, or am I sufficient where I'm at? Ed, what feedback do you have on that? Because again, this is
I think you nailed it. Again, we're going to save time, money, frustration. And when you partner with a company like us, we're very familiar with those frameworks. We come through, we're just boom, 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 boom. Things that we can get an answer to quickly and move on, we do. Things that need to be changed, we identify it. And the goal is just get you ready for the final assessor.
All right. Let's keep moving on here. Again, if you guys have any questions, we are open to answering them in real time. I'm going to open up this discussion, but I want Ed, you to kind of chime in on this, right? Like, why are we here? Why is Ed and MSP and Eric, Bowser at the end of the Mario game, like the big bad boss? Why are we here? Why are we talking to you? Like, why is this important? Like, I've a very specific thought, right? My mission in life is to make sure whoever needs compliance is getting it done by the correct folks, doing it right, in a budget-friendly environment where appropriate, and doing it right the first time. I can't tell you how many people invest incorrectly the first time, and then they come back and say, man, how am I going to pay for your services? I've already spent all this money incorrectly. And it's like, now granted, that's not my problem, but it's like, I feel for those people, because it's like, you've done you've got swindled, you've got told incorrectly, or somebody was like, yeah, I can help you do this. So like, making sure your MSP is doing the right effective things to keep you compliant, whether that's them helping you administratively or outsourcing it to an appropriate partner, making sure they have the correct technical products in scope based on the standards. Some standards require different technical cloud service providers than other standards that might allow for, like a good example is like CMMC versus some of these other standards. you might need a different tool to suffice that standard versus that standard. I'll let Ed speak to that. And then, remember, my piece here is like, I'm just there to audit, to validate, and certify. Like, for some of these standards, it is legally, we are not allowed to say like, hey, like, you're missing this, it's not right. Some standards, truthfully, we are allowed to kind of coach you through it. And again, those are more of the less regulated industries, but like something like CMMC or FedRAMP or ISO, ISO, like we can't, it is illegal for us to come in and say, you have missed this, fix it right now, introduce new evidence to us, and we will just accept it. That's not how that works, right? And that's a tough place for me to be. But like making sure you have the right partner on the front end and making sure I'm partnered with the right people who bring ready clients to me. The worst thing for me to do is go, whoa. I know you wanted November 5th, but like, you don't have any of this documentation. We can't even get started with my piece before you go back to Ed, because maybe you didn't work with an Ed and now you need to. So now you've introduced more budget you were not even prepared for, right? So in that facet, we close gaps faster, we reduce audit fatigue, and we prevent rework calls, right? All of that equates to number 3. And I just can't express how important it is for me to have people like Ed in my corner and for Ed to have people like him in my corner. And for you as the end client to say, wow, Ed, you are more valuable by having the auditor in this conversation early and often, rather than just letting me go find my auditor on my own. And that is why we were here, because Ed believes in that. And we believe in Ed that he can get the work ready for us to do it. And really, it just helps us with staffing and making sure we're on track to get these certifications issued. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to fail. But if we have to, we have no choice. Ed, what feedback do you have on?
Oh, just briefly. Most organizations, when we get involved, we're finding IT leaders that are well-meaning, but no one has given them the proper training on this. This is usually new to them. Most of them have not mastered one framework, let alone several, and it becomes a real challenge. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll kind of continue this with that one. Oh, well, this is more of a generic audit roadmap. It talks about getting ready, identifying your gaps, getting your documentation ready. With an MSP partnership, we're able to make sure that these things are being done, because this is what we do every day. And then we kick it off to the auditor, who does that independent validation. And post-audit, there are options for continuous monitoring or regular annual updates. But go to the next slide. That's the more one I wanted. So I created this one in it. This is another keeper for yourself. The blue area talks about what Sagacent typically does in this kind of situation. The green is ControlCase. So, and this is the process we follow. Again, many of these standards are a little bit vague. They leave it up to interpretation. This is a good policy for you to follow, or process. Step 1 is come in and assess everything. Identify the documentation, what's missing, what controls aren't in place, document everything that's found. Then we issue a piece of paper. It's a report. We're identifying the gaps. Hey, here are all the standards that you were supposed to do. Here are the areas that you missed. Once everybody's understood where that is and what we need to do, we can move on to stage 3, which is remediation. Now let's roll up our sleeves and start fixing things that we've identified in the previous report that need to get done. Finally is prepare the audit for the audit or the review. This is actually harder than it sounds, because auditors are going to want the data in a certain order, to look in a certain way. We have to get all that information and put it in a central repository. Many of these standards, there's some vagueness. We can use different platforms. If you're doing CMMC, there's only one that's acceptable. But again, you want all that data there, because you don't want to tee off the auditors. You want to make sure that they come in, they're finding everything, and they're going to bless you at the end and say, yeah, we attest that you're doing everything correct. Eric, you want to talk about the 2 green boxes?
Yeah, we actually have a question, and I think it's perfect time.
Good.
I'm looking at Thomas. He said, we're a small business. they're building custom systems, understand they're not at the stage to formally certify against 27001 or other compliance standards. And basically they're saying, what are the essential prerequisites that we should have in place before saying we're ready, which is what I want to key on what you just mentioned. And then they ask specific questions like what baseline documentations, right? So like you used ISO 27001, right? The
Yes.
blue that you see that Ed just put up there is you building out your ISMS, which includes all of your documentation, your policies, your procedures, and all the technical requirements that ISO 27001 upholds. Right now, again, remember, ISO 27001 has very specific things that's asking for. So it's in your best interest with, partner with Ed to go control by control by control to make sure you are building your ISMS to completion. But something like CMMC, the same exists in their SSP. If you're going and doing PCI or HIPAA, right? Same type of documentation, just presented a little different. Then you asked like what technical control should be demonstrated, right? It all depends on what environment is in scope. And again, I don't want to get too specific, and maybe this is a discussion you and Ed should have offline, because really when the auditor does come in and you deem something in scope, we can't just say like, oh, we're going to forget about it, right? Ed talked about preparing this audit package. You never want to lead the auditor down a path that you didn't intend them to go. You want to make sure you show them, hey, focus on this. Here's the tools you should be focused on. And here's this big blockade wall around my scope. Nothing more, nothing less. And then you said, and again, I want to give you Ed a chance to ask, or answer some of the questions. It says, what level of evidence? And then do auditors expect a certain maturity period? So again, it's such a terrible answer, but it's all dependent, right? So like for some of these standards, like a SOC 2 type 2, yeah, you need to have like 6 months of evidence compiled for maturity. You don't have to, but like the report won't read right. It's just whoever's looking at it will not, most people will not accept the SOC 2 report that doesn't have at least 6 months. But for something like ISO and something like CMMC, it just, as long as you're telling the assessors that certain controls are in place for a certain period of time, like it's not in your best interest to say, we do this check every 6 months, but your program's only been operational for 3 months. How are we supposed to know that you do this every 6 months if you have a new program? So it's just making sure you do what you say and you say what you do. Like for all of these standards, whatever your evidence says, make sure you can back it up with your technical controls and make sure whoever we're interviewing can showcase that. And then that is what the assessor is looking for. Ed, what comments do you have for Thomas?
Well, actually, you answered a lot of it well, but I'm gonna come in from a different angle. I love helping clients. I love a co-managed environment where we're backing up the IT leader who's had this put on his shoulders and he's got to deal with it. The time to learn about all this stuff was quite some time before you needed to address this. It takes time. But when we get involved with a company, you say you're a small manufacturer, and I gave the example of that machine shop that was making aluminum parts for jet fighters and stuff. They were very small. And their IT people, they really wanted to do this, but we came in and we worked hand in hand. We talked about what are the standards, what are the measurements, and we don't like to go in and act like we have all the answers. You go wait in another room while we do everything. No, we want you to roll up your sleeves and work with us. You're going to give us many of the answers. By the end of the process, you've learned it so that you're much more capable going forward. On the chart here, there's actually 3 pieces of information. 2 are a little bit subtle. They're down at the bottom. There are 3 ways that we get involved in most of these compliance situations with companies. One is we might get hired to do the audit. That's the 4 blue boxes. And we can come in and do that. I will tell you that that's a minority of my business. Most often, down at the bottom, you'll see a black bar. Most often we'll get hired by the organization. They say, we want you to co-manage this organization with us, back up our IT people, work for them, and make sure that these things are done. We love forming that kind of a partnership. In that case, we're here to augment your skills and make sure that everything goes smoothly. The third category is a GRC category, or a GRC partnership. And that's where we're going to be assisting you specifically in governance, risk management, and compliance. But we're going to be working with you to make sure that you can do this stuff as we go along. We're not here to replace anybody. We're here to make sure that we get to the end game and with all the questions answered. How's that, Eric?
I'll add, right? So just to address maybe a few more things, right? So it is in your best interest, to Ed's point, is to work with a company that can help you identify who is asking for this and what is the appropriate standards you need to, right? You used ISO 27001, but you also said maybe others, right? You should be immediately figuring out what your compliance roadmap looks like and to say, what is your priority standard and what is your least priority standard? Because remember, a lot of these map together. You could knock out a bunch of birds with the same stone. If you're going after like a SOC and a HIPAA, a lot of the controls map, right? So it's in your best interest to first pick your standard, the most priorities. From there, Ed made a great point. Whether you're co-managed or fully managed or not managed at all, that is a decision you have to make pretty early. Because when you come to the assessor's door, that's the first thing I'm going to ask you. I'm going to say like, hey, do you have an MSP? Is your MSP managing your infrastructure 100% or co-managed? I mean, it's literally the first question I ask. So, obviously it's in your best interest to use a partner that's done this before that can get you compliant, because it's a really tough place to be if your leadership says like, hey, good luck, you guys have to do this on your own and you're responsible for if we pass or fail. And you're like, I've never done this before, right? But again, all of that blue. So my only feedback is, and I promise this is not a shameless plug, it's just a reality. I want to know about you when you are assessing gaps and validating scope. You should in theory even be locking in with me when that period happens, even if you are months and months and months and months away from being compliant. The reason for that is timeline, like Ed mentioned. What if you do need this quicker than usual and I'm booked out? So as long as scope is identified and you're doing that in the assess and determine gaps phase, I should be included, which Ed always does. You include me early. We validate scope together. We work on making sure that hey, okay, Eric, we need ISO 27001. We're looking for March 2026. And then in June, we want to go after CMMC. What's your schedule like? And then we will lock you. You should be locking in whether it's us or a different auditor. And then you engage with Ed, and then you start to sprint. And you start to go to the finish, and you have to set realistic timelines and make sure that you're appropriately managing the project. But like it puts a little fire to make sure that there's an end goal, which you can always slide, but with enough notice. But where the issue happens is if you were to connect with me on the back end and say, I'm ready for my assessment, I might say, great, we are booking into February 2027. You're like, whoa, what? Like, I'm ready now, right? So it's in your best interest as you're identifying those gaps and you're preparing for all those things to engage an auditor. And then again, all of your questions are addressed in these remediation steps that Ed is talking about, is determining your gaps, identifying documentation, making sure you know who is responsible for what. It is the worst place to be if the assessor comes in and goes, who's responsible for this? And you go, Ed? Ed's like, I don't know. Is that for you? Like, it is in your best interest to communicating with the right partners, identifying responsibility, and coming in fully prepared for the big bad auditor, and then keeping up with it, right? We're just talking about time up to audit. There's a whole world that happens thereafter. So I'm going to continue, but I hope that addressed your question. And I think this was the perfect slide to address it all. And this is, I think this leads us to the final slide, Ed. I will let you run this, but this is kind of our send-off point. And I'm sure you guys know a lot of these, but it's
funny. As Eric and I were getting ready for this, I go, there aren't enough items here because the risks are so numerous. Yeah, the list, loss of contracts and revenue opportunities. I'm seeing relationships end because things couldn't be demonstrated. Increased audit costs due to rush remediation. You're going to get massive frustration from leaders and things like that if you can't get this done quickly. It works a lot better if you have partners coming in and say, no, this is normal. You have to plan for it this way. Often I think I run interference for a lot of lead IT people when I come in and say, no, your expectations, your demands on I'll say Thomas, are unrealistic given what you're trying to do. Reputational damage, well, we see that a lot. It's funny. All we ever see in the news is these large companies that have already attained these compliance standards, and they're getting hacked left and right. I will tell you, they're much, much more secure if they've actually gone through this process. But we can guarantee if it's done incorrectly, you should expect that the reputational damage is going to be catastrophic. And the failure of being able to produce certification is just really bad on business relationships, whether it be customers or subs or masters that you're trying to work with. The legal and regulatory penalties are really nasty. Happily, knock on wood, I've never had to deal with one of those because we deal up front. We're very clear. I'm very quick to write a document and get it out to the different parties and say, this is our plan. This is how we're going to address it. People in the end just want to be informed. And you've got to maintain that clarity throughout the whole process. Eric, what else do you want to add?
Let's say I have nothing to add. I think the slide speaks for itself. What I want to do in the last 4 minutes, if okay, we do have another question from Tammy. I want to address it. She's asking basically what GRC tools are out there that help. Here's what I will say, right? Shameless plug for ControlCase. As the auditor, we have a tool that we use called Compliance Hub. It is specific to framework. It works really well in SOC 2 engagements, HIPAA engagements, things like that. GDPR, PCI, that you get for free when you engage with us. And the idea would be that you would dump the information into our platform and you would run the audit that way. What I will say in full transparency, there are a lot of good GRC tools, right? There are a lot of paid for GRC tools that do a phenomenal job of helping you keep these multi-framework, multi-platform things in scope. Some are CMMC specific, some are FedRAMP specific, some are multi-tenant. What I will say again, without fully shamelessly plugging, is I'd love to talk to you about our tool and how it makes sense. But Ed, what tools have you seen that you've used? Because I've talked to them all, and they're all great partners of ours. Some do a phenomenal job of setting them up for the end auditor. Who have you engaged with?
Well, I don't want to name names, but there are several products I've looked at. But frankly, I look at the solution that I think is more complete. Is it more than just an auditing or GRC platform in the cloud? And if there aren't people to back it up when you have questions and really support you, you're going to be in a bad way. So that's one of the reasons I'm a ControlCase partner.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Vanta, Tammy, and again, it's not in our position to say good, bad, or indifferent. All these tools have a phenomenal way of getting you to the finish line, but it is in your best interest to make a cost decision. And again, we could talk offline because there are opportunities for you to Ed, Eric, you to get to the finish line and have some options that, depending on which framework you want to go after. I have heard Vanta is expensive. I don't know their exact pricing, but they're a player in the ecosystem. I did see a hand up, Ahmed. Can they unmute themselves? Not able to speak. If you're able to type it in the chat or questions, we can address it. Any other questions? And Ahmed, if we don't get to your question, we could connect offline.
Yeah, the last slide, we've added our email addresses, Eric.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll go to that. Yep. There it is. Yep. So Ed and Mai's information, reach out to both of us. We're a team here. We'll get this together again. While I'm waiting for Ahmed to write his question, I'll just kind of close out here. This is recorded. We will be sending this out to you. Happy to reach out to you. Happy to have these discussions. No expectations on our end. If it makes sense to engage with us and work together, we would love to support you. Again, please let us know if you have any questions. We will address them. If the timer ticker runs out, we've got about a minute left. I don't see any other in chat, and I don't see any in questions. And again, I just wanted to see if Ahmed's question was able to pop up. Ed, any final thoughts from your end? I appreciate you jumping on here.
No, I think we've done a good job. I know that ControlCase, in the invites they sent out, they had links to numerous documents. I really encourage you to download those and take a look. Those will help you. In my case, for Sagacent, we help people coast to coast. So I've made several references to the San Francisco Bay Area where we're located. Don't think that we only support businesses here. As long as you're in the continental US, we'll take care of you. That's my final statement.
Yeah, no, I echo that. So again, we're a global firm. So wherever you're located, whatever framework you have, there's a lot of options out there. Look, I will happily navigate you. You've got great partners like Ed. There's other partners. I will happily dispel the snake oil. I will happily talk through any questions you have, and I will happily connect you in our world. And that is why Ed and I are here together, is because he is one of those connection points for me. And we as a group want to take you to the finish line. So I will close out. We are at time. Ahmed, if you have any questions, we will reach out to you separately. And to everybody that's asked a question and everybody that's joined, thank you so much. Have a good one, guys. See ya.